Item number F. Number 5-18 SBR SoNo Metro LLC and 24 Monroe LLC. 20 and 24 Monroe Street, 5 and 11 Chestnut Street. 5 and 6 story. This is a TOD application.
Mr. Chairman.
So, yes,
I have to recuse myself from this matter.
you do?
Yes.
Okay. Happy trails.
But I'll be back.
Okay. All right. So,
Doing in
okay.
Yeah.
Attorney Sachi, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Liz Succi of Carmody, Torrance, Sandag, and Hennessy. We represent the applicant, SoNo TOD LLC. And this is a project that is proposed for the eastern side, or the eastern side of the railroad tracks, on the tracks that are going east toward New Haven. The property and the project is proposed for an area of town that is starting to see a bit of redevelopment. First with the police department on Monroe Street and South Main Street, the 6878 South Main Street adaptive reuse. And on this first visual, you'll see that long, low-lying building on the right side of the screen. That's 11 Chestnut Street, which you may recall from about 4 years ago. It's currently undergoing redevelopment and for adaptive reuse for office on the first floor and then 16 units above. The project that's before you this evening, we're very excited about it, brings closure to that corner in that it will incorporate the 11 units at 16 units at 11 Chestnut, and then develop this new structure on the corner of Railroad Place, Station Place, however that's the best terminology for it, Chestnut Street, which is on the opposite side of that proposed new building, and Monroe Street. Proposal is on a property that's about 73,000 square feet.
I'm sorry, Liz.
Yes.
Can you just orient us in terms of where Chestnut is, where the railroad station is?
Chestnut's on the opposite side. Monroe Street is here. And this is Railroad Place leading out onto Monroe Street.
Okay, so the railroad's behind us.
Behind us. That's right.
You're looking east.
You're looking east toward East Norwalk.
Right.
So the project envisions the redevelopment of about 73,000 square feet with first floor retail fronting on Monroe and on Chestnut, first floor parking, mezzanine parking, and then about 106 residential units above it. Sure.
Go ahead.
We notified neighbors in accordance with your regulations of the submission of the application. We've undergone a SEAC meeting on August 22nd, and we're working through comments and questions and suggestions, not only by the SEAC agencies, but also by the peer review architectural consultant and also the traffic consultant, which they have undertaken their reviews, and we have interfaced with them. At this point, I would like to have Jim Rotundo, who's the project engineer of Godfrey Hoffman, walk you through the site plan and some of the drainage comments and plans. Then we'll have Colin Grothier and Bruce Beinfield, project architects, walk you through the architecture, just very briefly recognizing that there's still going to be the peer review that you will review and have questions for of our consultant, also your own, but at least to give you a flavor of what this is all about.
Quickly to staff, what is the status of the architectural review that we've undertaken?
Sure. The peer review consultant was in last week and met with staff. And after that, we provided the applicant with a series of comments and questions. And we did meet with them 2 days ago? Yesterday? Yesterday. And they, I think we came to agreement on a lot of the recommendations and comments, and there were still a few outstanding questions. We anticipate getting revised drawings in response to that next week, at which point that revised set will go to the peer review consultant who will issue a report. They will be here on the 20th as well. And we also have a peer review traffic consultant. That was the same firm that worked on 230 East Avenue. They have all the materials, and we anticipate them being here on the 20th as well.
I'm not sure that all the commissioners understand this peer review process. Maybe it's worth explaining the actions we took last year to get to this point.
And this goes beyond there was the SoNo TOD planning effort that occurred many years ago, and it was a long-term planning effort for the South Norwalk area. Even before I started officially here, we began working on the zoning for the South Norwalk TOD area, which took and part of that was just delay on, my part on purpose. But we took about 2 years when we redid the zoning, which you recall you approved in April of 2018. This is, I think, the third project that you have seen in response to the new regulations. So
That's what I was referring to.
Yeah.
The adoption of the new regulations. I'm not sure Kelly knows about that.
Well, no, and thank you so much, because I actually made a note to myself to go research peer review consultant process.
I'll address that as well.
Appreciate
Just so, and the last note I'll finish up about that is that, the process and the regulations that ensued from the plan left it that, the city undertook this planning effort, and I believe there really wasn't significant opposition. I think their plan was embraced. The zoning regulations, we went through several public hearings, including a joint hearing with the Planning Commission, and I don't believe there really was significant opposition at all to the proposals that came forward. So the majority of the applications were submitted and proposed as part of a site plan process as opposed to a special permit public hearing process, with the thought being, okay, you signed off on the planning document that came forward, you signed off on the zoning regulations because they're consistent with and in response to the plan. And so if those projects that come forth after that are consistent with the zoning regulations and the plan, then, really let's get down to the critical items that are left, which is the project design and then any kind of traffic implications. The Zoning Commission in 2017, I believe, adopted a regulation which gives them the ability to hire a outside third-party consultant for, could be anything. What we have on board is for traffic, and we have one on board for architectural and planning services. So when a project like this comes in, it's considered a significant project. We have that outside peer review firm that does the review of the traffic to make sure what is being proposed is consistent with normal practices. And for the architectural peer review, they're looking at to make sure that what is being proposed is consistent with the design elements that are within the TOD plan and also consistent with the broader long-term planning of the city. And the last point is that third-party traffic peer review is hired by the city and contracted by the city. They work for us, but that is paid for by the applicant who cuts the city a check, and whatever funds are not used at the end go back to the to the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Very helpful.
Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. Good evening. My name is Jim Rotundo. I'm a licensed professional engineer with Godfrey Hoffman Associates, with offices located at 26 Broadway in North Haven. The proposal for this project consists of the construction of two new mixed-use buildings. Just to orient you on the plan, Chestnut Street is located along the bottom of the plan, Monroe Street to the right, and the train station is located to the top of the plan. The two buildings will consist of a new six-story building located on the intersection of Chestnut and Monroe that's designated as number 1 Chestnut Street. That'll contain retail on the first floor with 106 units of residential units on the floors above. The second building is an existing two-story brick masonry building located at 11 Chestnut Street. That building is being maintained and is being renovated for the new use. That will consist of office space on the first floor and 16 units of new residence on the second floor. Parking for the development will be provided on two surface parking lots, one to the south or to the left of the 11 Chestnut building, the other to the north or to the right of the 11 Chestnut building. The new six-story building will also have 2 levels of interior parking. The lower level will be accessed through the northerly parking lot on 11 Chestnut Street and into the lower level. The second level will be accessed through the existing driveway into the railroad station and into the second level parking. Each of the surface level lots on 11 Chestnut will each have a curb cut for their own access there. Based on the requirements specified in the regulations, 142 spaces are required for the proposed uses. Applying the mixed-use parking overlap criteria reduces this number to 127 spaces required. We're providing within the surface level, or the surface parking lot, 76 spaces, and within the 2 levels of the interior lot garages, there's 82 spaces. So we have a total of 158 parking spaces being provided. 9 spaces are also going to be constructed on the street, on Chestnut Street, along the the number 1 Chestnut building. Refuse and recycling facilities are also going to be provided within the first level of the interior parking garage. A new streetscape is also proposed around the perimeter of the site. This will consist of new sidewalks, pavers, lighting, and trees. Eric Rains, our landscape architect, is here tonight, who will elaborate and give you a little more detail on those improvements. We're also will be providing extension of utilities to serve the 2 buildings. Current facilities are located within Chestnut and Street and Monroe Street. Those will be extended into the property. We've also designed a stormwater management system in accordance with the 2017 Norwalk Drainage Manual. The components in this system are located within the surface parking area that consists of structures for stormwater treatment, as well as providing stormwater detention. Surface runoff will run through those structures and will ultimately be conveyed into the existing City of Norwalk system within Chestnut Street. The system, as designed, provides for no increase in the rate of flow or volume of flow in the post-development condition.
Excuse me, are you prepared to move forward with this? Because I noticed you're giving us a lot of information right now.
Prepared to, what do you mean prepared to, I don't know.
Are there any design modifications or anything that has to, or do you have you acquired all the properties around and you're ready to move forward?
Yes.
The applicant has all the properties, they own all the properties right now. There aren't any acquisitions that are underway for this project for the intersection.
So you're ready to go to public hearing?
If a public hearing is something that you deem appropriate, because this is a site plan review application, and that was, as Mr. Kleppen noted, one of the concepts behind the TOD was to see if those could be avoided,
Right.
to meet all requirements.
Now, my understanding is that this is only part of a larger project that the applicant would like to be able to move forward on, should you be able to acquire the necessary properties and so forth. I would be interested in seeing what the developer feels the entire project would look like, so that we get to see this in context of possible future development.
I think and you're right, there are other phases contemplated. They haven't been designed yet. What we were hoping would be that we could move forward with this project as quickly as possible, and perhaps give you some indication, just generally speaking, as to what the next phase would be. But we also anticipate following up with that next phase very, very quickly. I would say within the next, however many months. I don't even think we're months away from that. But in terms of seeing what that next phase is in a design or conceptual plan phase, we're not at that stage yet. We can certainly talk about it just in generalities, but I also don't want to lead you astray and think that it's X when eventually when you see it, it's Y. But in answer to your first question, there's at least one more phase that's contemplated and would be before you very quickly under the same site plan review process.
What about with that parking? Are you comfortable with that? The parking?
In terms of?
Is there going to be any modification with regard to the parking on the?
One parking lot is existing in connection with 11 Chestnut and is being updated to accommodate that 11 Chestnut approval, which was granted several years ago. But in terms of the new on-grade parking, maybe Jim could just let me know what's necessary to accommodate that.
I'm not aware of any future improvements that would necessitate changes to what we're proposing on these plans. If that answers your question, we've designed these to meet the requirements of what we're proposing here.
Did you say that the requirement is 120, about 120 spaces and you're providing 150?
That's correct, 158.
So why are you building more parking than is required?
Well, I think it's the client's, the owner and the applicant, it's his desire from a marketing standpoint and from being able to provide patrons of this building the necessary parking to accommodate it.
Rod, also, I mean, again, this goes to my question. It may be that some of that excess parking will go toward later phases
I see.
of the project.
Right.
Liz, there was also a question. I went through the plans that were submitted in some detail, and I noticed that there were no affordable units on levels 5 and 6 of the new building.
Well, typically, we distribute them randomly throughout the building, but if that is something that you want us to take a look at, my client will certainly review and see if there is a better mix.
Yeah, I think as we always have, we would like to see them distributed throughout the building on each floor.
That was a comment staff provided back.
Okay.
Okay, so you are working with staff with
Oh,
regard
absolutely.
to
Staff has provided
those,
us with.
workforce housing or whatever?
Staff has provided us with a laundry list of comments, questions, suggestions, and just general inquiries into the project. We also have received comments from the third-party design reviewer from an architectural perspective. So all of those comments we're evaluating and making changes, as well as comments that arose out of the SEAC meeting 2 weeks ago.
And you plan to, before, now, I'm not quite sure, because you mentioned staff about a public house. I'm not having to do a public hearing?
Correct. You're not, the idea conceptually was, and this is kind of my thinking on this, that you went through a very lengthy, and I say you, meaning the city,
Right.
through a very lengthy planning process to see the kind of development occur in South Norwalk that, you know, you feel will benefit the city, especially around the train station as being a major asset in that area. And then the zoning regulations that were enacted are consistent with that. So if you line up a project that meets your zoning regulation, which is consistent with the plan that was approved, then the idea would be to expedite the project forward because you've already taken the necessary steps to get it to that.
But how do we address, for example, the architectural issue? I don't want to leave the final decisions on that to a consultant. I think the commission would like to be involved in that.
Well-
And I think the same goes for the traffic study.
Correct. And the way the SoNo TOD regulations were written is that they must comply with the design guidelines set forth in the SoNo TOD regulations. Because previously, and in some other, this was in a redevelopment area, so that authority solely rested with the redevelopment agency, so you would often defer comments to the redevelopment agency who was also conducting an outside peer review. The way that SoNo TOD regulation is written is that you're kind of doing a joint review with the redevelopment agency. And so you'll get the ability, you know, any comments or questions that you have pertaining to the architecture of the plan as presented, you can provide that to the applicant tonight. You can get that to me, and we can feed that directly to the applicant as well as the outside peer review consultant.
My personal feeling is I don't have enough information. I don't feel I have enough information to move a project of this size forward.
Well, you're not doing anything tonight. You're not asked to take any action on it tonight.
Okay, good.
So they'll assuming they get their redesign work done in the next couple of weeks, they'll be back in front of you on the 20th to go through the presentation again. At that point in time, you can interact with they'll also have Mr. Galante here from, I'm assuming Mike Galante is the consultant.
Will the peer review work be done by that time?
It should be, yeah. They've been done. They should be done by, that was a deadline that we gave them. Worst case scenario is there's the first week in October is your first meeting there. So we think the 20th works schedule-wise, but if not, that's the fallback position.
It's my understanding as well, and correct me if I missed this, that both Mr. Galante, our team, and also the peer review consultants for traffic and architect will be present on the 20th as well. So all of them will be present for whatever questions you may have.
I would certainly like to see more elevations, and I'd like to see the elevations from Chestnut, from Monroe, from the railroad. To the extent that you can provide it, even if it's just a designation of bulk, what a full build-out might look like. We're not.
Are you asking in relation to this project? Because we have those. They were submitted, and I can show them to you if you want to.
No, I mean the other parts of this, of the larger project that the developer envisions.
I just don't believe that by certainly the 20th or the 4th, since for the next phase there are some acquisitions that have not been finalized as yet. Right. So we're still in that. If we acquire the properties, then we can start developing the plans for them. We're happy to share what conceptually my client has in mind, but as far as seeing plans for those,
well, that's fine. That's why I'm saying something that just deals with the bulk and some idea of what we're gonna see.
And to your point, and that was one of the concerns raised by the peer review consultant. He was talking specifically, if you look at the picture that's up there now, the parking lot, which is on the left, it's possible that may no longer be a parking lot in the future. So he brought up issues related to the streetscape and the view shed, looking not only from Chestnut, but also what you might visualize from the parking lot. But those may get addressed with the second phase. So and I think to Attorney Suchi's point, maybe something conceptual on the lines of what you might see in a phase 2, which would also require them to come back in front of the commission to get that final approval. So you get a bigger picture of what the whole project will look like, but you're only approving the first phase.
Exactly.
And the other thing,
we can provide you with that, so you get just a level of understanding of what may be coming.
Right.
We'll do the best we can with that.
Okay.
And the other thing is, I could understand now a little clearer where you're heading, and we really don't want to have to hold you up if you're really planning on moving this forward, because we know from living in that area that some of those buildings have been sitting there for a long period of time, and it doesn't look good for the neighborhood.
Oh, so, without doubt. I think this would certainly be
if you're really planning on moving forward, then I believe that this commission would want to work with you.
That would be great.
To be certain, as well as with the peer review.
Would it be a hardship to move this to the early October meeting so that on the 20th we can talk about the peer review work in some detail?
Well, you're under, I would say my recommendation would be keep it on the 20th and go through the steps, and at the end of that meeting portion for this application, you can decide whether, you're under no requirement to vote that night. So if you want to sit and think about it or have further questions or want to see another modification here or there, you're not required to close it and vote that night. So don't feel like you're obligated to do so that night.
Okay.
But I think they'll be ready on the 20th to hear a little more in-depth detail about the design and what our peer consultants have thought about the project.
And is there any concern that the public really doesn't get a full voice in this process because there's potentially no public hearing?
Or if there's a way to address the public so that they understand, similar like what you did with this commission, so that they understand that this is not being pushed down their throats without having a public hearing. Some justification.
I don't want to speak for Mr. Kleppen, but as I mentioned earlier, we're obligated to notify all abutters of the filing of the application, and I can submit to you that no one has contacted me by phone or by email. I don't know if the same has been true for staff. So the word is certainly out to those most immediately affected by the development, and to date, I haven't heard from anyone.
I did get a call, and then I said, provided them, please feel free to come into the office and take a look at the
Yeah.
plans.
But this is a six-story building in an area that has traditionally been two and a half stories. And people other than just the immediate abutting property owners might have concern about how this potentially will affect them.
Well, I mean, not to counter-argue, but I guess I am. Considering this is a site plan approval.
Right.
Your discretion is more limited than it is under a special permit process. So
Right.
if the regulations allow 6 stories with,
true.
FAR of X and the applicant complies with that, to be honest with you, I don't think you're in any legal standing to deny that application. So that's why I think when the planning process occurred and we had, how many public hearings occurred for the plan itself, how many meetings that I attended, where the commission just discussed it in general, plus the numerous public hearings we had on the regulation amendments itself, where the public was given ample opportunity to opine on whether they think we should do 6 stories or 8 stories or 2 stories. I think, to me, that's when that process occurred. That's just my opinion.
I agree with you in this particular situation. And the beauty is that there is no property that's being taken through eminent domain or anything like that. This is property that's there, and I really would like to see it developed. And as long as we're doing everything with the letter of the law, then it makes sense that we move forward, knowing what we know, but just making it clear that the public understands that also. Because I hear what you're saying, but when we sit here and we hold these public hearings, and people see public hearings, and then they all of a sudden see something that's approved, as long as it's clear, then I believe that we're moving in the right direction.
And the only other thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up, is the original TOD plan area was over 120 acres, and the actual rezone acreage, I think, was 50-something. So we did shrink that, proliferation
Okay.
down quite a bit.
I just had a procedural question. So it's before us tonight, kind of like as a preview?
Right, an initial, I mean, technically, if they had out, like the previous applications under the CAM section, a lot of those technically are under like similar site plan procedural steps. So, but this is obviously on a much different scale than that. So you're not going to be able to necessarily take all that information in at one meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I think we've heard enough for one evening.
Would you like to see the
Okay.
architecturals?
I mean, it's going to be before us on the 20th too, right?
If we're going to see it on the 20th,
Yeah.
And we have them in our package.
and
You do.
we don't need to see them again
Yeah.
tonight. Thank you.
Okay. See you on
Okay,
tonight.
and good night.